Welcome to the DVD Killer Tutorial, the Survivor Rulebook Edition. Firstly, you should know your role. And as a killer, your role is to ensure that survivors have fun and that you should follow the Survivor Rulebook. The killer is not allowed to create a 3-gen and is not allowed to chase survivors away from the gen if he recently hooked them. If the survivors fail a skill check and the killer goes to the gen, it is the responsibility of the killer to assess who he hooked last and not to attack that person. If he does, that will be seen as tunneling and the survivors have the right to harass the killer after the game. The killer is allowed to damage the gen, however he is not allowed to use the following perks: Brutal Strength, Discordance, Bitter Murmur, Dragon's Grip, Hex Ruin, Hex Undying, Oppression, Thanatophobia, and Pop Goes the Weasel. If he uses any of these perks, it will be seen as unfun for the survivors and they have the right to call the killer tryhard, baby killer, noob, or trash at the end of the game. When chasing survivors, the killer should only chase survivors he hasn't hooked in the last 2 minutes. He must always chase after survivors that flashlight click and he should allow them to loop. Perks like Bamboozle, Coup de Grace, Fire Up and Hex Crowd Control is strictly forbidden. Killers should always respect pallets and if stunned by a pallet they should allow the survivor to teabag or get a flashlight stun. Perks like Enduring and Brutal Strength are not allowed. For the full list of banned perks in this situation, refer to the manual. Because killer powers are so OP, the following list of killers are not to be played in any circumstances. This includes but is not limited to the Nurse, Spirit, Blight, the Twins, Oni, Hag, Freddy, Pyramid Head, Hillbilly, and of course Baba. Please refer to the manual for banned add-ons and offerings. When attacking survivors, the killer should make chases fun for the survivor and not use perks like No Head. Tunneling will be met with death threats at the end of the game. If a survivor escapes a chase briefly, the killer should stand still for the mandatory teabag. If a recently hooked survivor heals, the killer should not interrupt them, even if they are doing it under the hook or in plain sight. That, my friend, is tunneling. Know your role. If the killer downs a survivor, he must pick them up. No slugging. If you slug, you will be met with nasty comments at in-game chat or on console and you will be reported and banned. Banned perks in this situation includes Agitation, Iron Grasp, Knockout, Mad Grit and Starstruck. After hooking a survivor, you must immediately leave the area. Even if there are other survivors or there are scratch marks, you must leave. The optimal play is to walk to the corner and stay there for 2 minutes. If you can, cancer will be wished upon you and or your loved ones. In the unfortunate event that a survivor is sacrificed to the entity, the killer must refrain from celebrating in any way or form and must allow the survivors to recover. Remember, your primary objective as killer is to ensure the fun of survivors. If a survivor is at the hatch, the killer should allow for a teabag and should never close the hatch in front of the survivor's face. If there's only one survivor left, the killer must give the hatch. If he doesn't, the killer will be harassed and or reported after the game. For the purposes of this tutorial, the killer is allowed to close the hatch to feel what it feels like. However, he is not allowed to do this in real life, in the game. He must always allow one survivor to escape. When the Endgame Collapse is triggered, the killer must report to the exit gates for his mandatory end of game teabagging session. Because killers are stupid, I'll say it again, you're not allowed to use No Head. No Head is toxic. You are also not allowed to use Rancor or Blood Warden, of course, or Maurice. For the purposes of this tutorial, you are allowed to hook the survivor. However, like I said earlier, you are not allowed to do so in real life. I mean, in the game. You should at least let one survivor live, or you are toxic. If a survivor is killed, the killer obviously broke a rule somewhere, so the survivor has the right to send GG easy. If a killer breaks any of the rules, the survivors are entitled to the following actions. Demand the killer follow the rules, report the killer, accuse the killer of being stupid, a horrible human being, or toxic. The survivor can also call the killer trash, tryhard, baby killer, camper and/or tunneler, and he can wish death or disease on the killer or his family. Thank you for following the rules.
You wanna see my butt? Here you go. You like it? Do you like my butt?